Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar Wednesday. Before we get started, just a quick reminder for those of you joining in, if you haven't joined us before, there are 3 links up on your screen right now. The first link is for the official GTS statement regarding the COVID-19 pandemic. We have our discussion link, which if you're a Gateway customer, you can jump on over to our community and continue the conversation beyond the webinar. Talk with other facilities, see what they're doing, share ideas, commiserate, etc. And the final link under Get Help is to our official support desk site. Again, for those of you who are Gateway customers, you can head on over there, and if you want official assistance in any way, shape, or form, just follow that link and let us know so we can reach out to help you. Matt, could you jump to the next slide, please? Okay, if we could just advance to the next slide, please.
Should have advanced. Let me try.
There we go. Okay, sorry, I was a little bit of a delay on my machine here. Perfect, thank you. So for this session, again, this for those of you who've been here before may be familiar. In order to be a little bit more structured in the conversation back and forth and make sure we're answering as many of the questions as possible, we will not be using the chat functionality in WebEx. Instead, we'll be using the Q&A. And you'll see on your lower right, there's a little Q&A panel. And in that panel, you can post your questions and we'll be able to respond to you. I see there's one already there as we speak. So we'll be able to respond to you, and we'll just keep that the question and the response tied together. So it makes it a little easier for you to follow along and for us to follow along and make sure we're addressing each question and match up the questions with the answers. So that's about it on the housekeeping for today. Just like I said, please feel free, post your questions. We'll get to as many of them as we can. We may take some of them into the conversation vocally. We may respond to others via that Q&A pod, but we will be sure to answer as many as we can, and we may have to take some outside the meeting if need be, so we can address everybody's needs. But with that, that is all of our housekeeping. Again, thank you for attending today, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Matthew Hohenstein to bring us forward.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming, and we're excited to talk today about how attractions can help and start thinking about optimizing the experience inside the attraction, understanding that we're probably going to be dealing with needing to limit capacity initially. We talked last week a little bit about how we might do that just as an attraction in total, and now we'll be talking about kind of some of the implications that happen within that attraction. So I wanted to just go through a quick agenda with you so you understand kind of what how the webinar is going to go today. We have set aside about 75 minutes to have this discussion, thanks to the feedback that we've gotten from each and every one of you from the past 5 webinars. We wanted to kind of devote a little bit more time to these because there's a lot of important discussion to have, and a lot of questions and things for us to think through together as a community. So we will be doing a community discussion and presentation of best practices. We have an entire panel of really great experts that are here to share their thoughts and ideas, and for us to kind of think through this together as an industry. And as Bill mentioned, we're going to be looking to you to provide questions. We'll be working with our panelists to provide some answers, and we'll really have this be a two-way dialogue. Now, this is somewhat of a public avenue. One of the things that we're trying to make sure that we do is make this available to everybody in the attractions community, because as an industry, we need to get through this together. So there is a chance that there is press attending, and that some members of the public may view stuff after the fact. What I would like to ask at this time is, if we do have any members of the press that are attending, if you don't mind just putting into the Q&A kind of the publication that you might be representing, or just identify that you're here as a member of the press. What we'd like to make sure is that, if there's any questions that you might have after this, that we connect you directly with one of the panelists that may have made a statement or whatnot, so that you can kind of help to get that connection and ensure that the information is properly represented if you're choosing to use it. So that's kind of our agenda in a very high level. I'm going to turn it over to Randy to talk a little bit about the community that we've got here.
Hello, everybody. Yes, please visit our community website here, www.gatewayticketing.com/community. As Matthew just mentioned, if you are interested in hearing what our community has been discussing and what these webinars have been about, there's some great resources there as well if you want to catch up, because we are going to be referring to some of our past webinar content. We did a webinar on kind of looking at your guest experience journey, and so it would be really helpful if you needed to go back. Just to let you know, typically these webinars have been, we've been having 400 or 500 people attend live, so you're in really some great community company. But we know that some of you guys have just learned about these webinars more recently. And if that's the case, just go over to that website and you can see some more information. I am going to introduce all of us here on the panel. So my friend Matthew is going to advance the slides. Oh, actually, let me tell you a little bit more about our series. This is our series that we have. We are trying to stay ahead and coming up with new content based on your responses. So this is optimizing the capacity managed guest experience inside your attraction, as Matthew had mentioned. Toward the end of the conversation today, we're going to discuss training and how critical those frontline employees are going to be to reopening at your attraction. So we're going to devote all of next week to recreating trust with your guests and retraining your staff. So many of our attractions are closed for a little bit of a time, and we know that we want to be the #1 destination and attraction that our valued guests visit when we reopen. So right now is the time to start setting the stage, to be transparent, and to communicate. So next week, we're going to focus our attention on that. And then the following week, we've had a lot of chatter about pricing. How are we going to price our attraction? We might have a limited operation. What's the right price? Do we want to charge more for a more VIP level experience? So the following week, we're going to discuss pricing, the guest experience in a post-COVID world, and what that might look like. So please continue to join us the next couple of weeks. And then hopefully we'll just keep on going with this and take the webinars where they need to go. So joining us today, it's me, Randy. Hi. My good colleague and friend Matthew Hohenstein is helping out as well. And we're really excited to have some great industry leaders. Ella. Hi, Ella. How are you today? Ella's joining us from Blue Loop. There's her contact information. We also have Andrea. Andrea is joining us from Event Network. She's the Vice President of Marketing and Communications. Event Network does an amazing job operating shops through so many cultural attractions. Then we'll be hearing from some of their operators as well. Also joining us today from Event Network is Larry Gilbert, their CEO. And two really good friends of mine are rounding off our panel. Kevin Kopedy, Director of Operations at Universal Studios Hollywood. Kevin and I started in this industry as 14-year-olds, so he might tell some stories about working in a water park back in the day. And then a really great friend and just a great community leader from the USS Midway Museum, Mark Berlin, their Director of Operations. So that's the team that is going to be sharing with you today. But we have Bill D'Angelo working behind the scenes as our Product Communications Manager. So any questions that you ask right over here, let us know, and we will do our best to share some information. And I just want a little shout out to Marcus. Hi, Marcus Gaines. You're here from the BBC News. We're happy to have you here. Any questions we can help you out with, just send them our way. And we will pass it back to Matthew Hohenstein to give us a bit of an industry update.
Great. So just wanted to kind of start off and see what else is happening in the global world related to the situation that we're all experiencing. One of the things that I ran across this week in doing some research was a study done by Ivy Alliance Tourism Consulting, China Comfort Travel Group, and the Pacific Asia Travel Association. And obviously, we're looking a lot to China since they kind of started to experience this first, and probably will be one of the first to fully come out of it, of what's going on there, just as leading indicators of what might happen elsewhere in the world. One of the things I found pretty interesting in this study was, they were looking at the top 3 factors that would deter travel, and asking individuals what they felt that was, and the one that won by 2/3 was worries about health and safety issues in traveling. And I think that really speaks to a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and how do we address that number one worry, because that's what is potentially going to control the volume of guests that feel comfortable returning or not. So there was a couple other reasons. Obviously, the epidemic may spread again, and income, which we may have a little bit less levers to control. But I think the first one is really in our wheelhouse, and being good hosts and hospitality folks, I think we'll be able to easily address. One of the other things that ran across, and as I was thinking of things that we as a community might need to start preparing for, was kind of the experience at Shanghai Haichong Ocean Park. Now, they had closed on January 24th, pretty much when all the other attractions did. And then on March 20th, they got the go-ahead, and they had some limitations in place, but they were able to reopen. The unfortunate part was about 10 days later, they kind of reacted to what was happening in their environment, what the potential for additional spread of the virus, and so they had to close their doors again. But then now here on April 17th, a few days later, we're able to reopen again, but imposed even maybe a little bit more limitations on exactly the experience that they delivered. And I think what this kind of highlights is that this is going to be a learning opportunity for us, right? We're going to go out, we're going to do something, we're going to find that, hey, it may not work, and we may have to react to it. And I think as we kind of get our mindset there, and we're prepared for that, I think it'll be helpful in making sure that we're successful and we're learning. One of the other things I had run across was several of the attractions that have reopened in China have really focused on making sure that they celebrate the essential workers or the healthcare workers that really did quite a lot while they were closed. Specifically, this was at Fanta Wild Oriental Heritage in Shanghai Ocean Park. And so they're providing free admission to those groups of folks and through the end of the year. One that I think that's a great public service and a great way to give back to the community. But as I thought about it a little bit more, it's also kind of seeding their attraction with folks that really know how to behave well in a post-COVID 2019 situation, right? Because these folks have experience, understand kind of the social distancing and things like that. So, probably will help a little bit in consumers, seeing behaviors that they also might want to model. And then we're very fortunate, as Randy mentioned, to have Ella joining us from Blue Loop. And so she's going to kind of help us to understand what she's starting to see in Europe in some of the areas that are starting to maybe come back online or get prepared for that. Ella?
Thank you, Matt. No, it's great to be here and to give everyone a bit of an update of what's happening in Europe. So as I'm sure everyone knows, the virus is caused most of Europe to be on lockdown with a few exceptions. The hardest hit regions are Italy, Spain, France, and the UK in terms of cases and the death rate. Some countries like Germany and Austria are starting to relax their restrictions slightly, so certain shops are able to be opening up. And because of that, I think some attractions are starting to think ahead and plan. And we've seen a few announcements on safety measures that parks are hoping to bring into place to encourage guests back. So the first one that we saw was, and apologies if I pronounce this wrong, Balawadi, which is a theme park in Belgium. They've introduced face masks for the staff and for the guests. They have strict social distancing rules. They'll have markers on the ground, that sort of thing. Rigorous cleaning and sanitation processes. Lots of security, even going through the park to check that people are adhering to the rules. Things like cleaning down the ride safety rails, lots of signage, but importantly, capping the visitors to the park. Toverland, again in the Netherlands, has also announced that they'll be doing time slot ticketing. And I know the webinar last week covered this in really great detail, and it's something that exhibitions and museums know a lot about. But I think it's pretty new to the theme park industry. So these are kind of plans for parks. They're not open yet, but they're kind of announcing what they're hoping to bring forward. when they do reopen. The only kind of outlier in Europe is Sweden. So as a country, they've done things a bit differently to the rest of us, and have, instead of lockdown, have just introduced very strict social distancing measures, and have really relied on trusting the public to adhere to them. And so they have been able to stay open with lots of restrictions in bars and restaurants and things like that. But it's kind of a good thing for our industry because it means that attractions have been able to do very limited openings. So currently the government has told the attractions that have to be 50 people in one place. So there's 2 examples here. First is Kolmården Wildlife Park in Sweden. They've opened up only on the weekends and only for pass holders and hotel guests are able to come. But they have 2 rides open. They'll have the queue rides are maxed out at 50 people. They've changed the queue ride around so that no one's really looking at each other, and hopefully going digital soon. And when you get to the front of the ride, they'll group families together. So they have a safari ride up, they have a roller coaster, and they'll be spacing, leaving gaps in between on the coaster as well. In addition to that, they have no indoor areas open, very limited food and beverage, social distancing measures, lots of sanitation, that sort of thing. But importantly, you can only book ahead online as well. And these are 2 photos that they've kindly allowed me to share. They've actually got a drone that they use every day to fly over and kind of see heat map, but in real life, the crowds, and see if there's any build up of crowds that they need to take a measure in real time as well. Another case study is Skans Djurpark, also in Sweden. They've done similar measures. They've also added in 100 extra signs throughout the park, lots of sanitation processes. Something unique that they've done is a festival-style entrance. So there's one gate at the front, and everyone goes through the same gate, and then there's kind of like a wide area where you can go into 3 different lanes as such to get your tickets. So they've introduced that. And also they've stopped advertising animal feeding times. So it's just going to happen spontaneously, and that's to discourage crowds as well. So everyone's kind of looking to Sweden, as they're the only ones that are currently open. Another exception is this one that I found at Safariland at Stuckenbrook in Germany. So because it's a drive-through safari, they've been able to stay open. They've got a special pass from the government, and you can hold tickets up to the window, scan them through the glass, and the toilets at the entrance and exit are going to be sanitized after every use. So they've got a kind of special exception. I think they're one of the very, very few that are open in Germany at the moment. This was also announced this week from Holovis. Holovis do some great technology for the industry, and they've launched this free app which is called Crowd Solo, and it's there to look at reservation, queue management technology, and look in real time at guest management. The guests will download the app, and even in their pocket, it will buzz if they're too close to another guest with the app as well. So it's kind of a way to help the guests as well as the operators. So that's launched this week as well. So yeah, that's a little update from us. Really, most of us are on lockdown, looking to Sweden, which is a bit of a glimmer of hope to see what we can do to get open again.
Great. Thank you very much, Ella, for that, and we look forward to your contribution in the discussion as it goes forward as well. So that's going to kind of move us now into kind of our main section of today's webinar, and that's really thinking through some of the ideas on how we operate our attractions inside the gates after that guest has entered the park. And I think Randy will want to start us off here, and as we think through this.
And absolutely, Ella, we also had some questions come in, so I'm going to give you some of these questions. Some people I'll ask them really quickly about social distancing in Belgium. Do you have any idea of what that social distancing rules and requirements are for Belgium?
I assume it's the same across Europe. I'm not 100% sure on this, but for us in the UK, it's 2 meters. But I'd have to check on that. But I'll check and have a look and get back to them.
Yeah. So that 6-foot kind of space, and you're actually going to see some of the pictures that we are going to be sharing with you shortly. It seems that that's kind of the norm, that there's probably some spacing right around there. And I definitely know that we're going to want to talk about virtual queues. So I definitely want to go back to that after I have a little chat here. So thanks. Well, in all the conversations I've been having, and is really that when we do get a chance to reopen, it's going to be this combination of effects that are going to help us make the decisions. We have our real world observations. Every one of us I'm looking at the video of our panelists, and if I could see the video of all of our hundreds of attendees here, I know that it will all look the same. You're in an office, you're in your home office, or you're in the side of your kitchen. You are home right now, and we really know that for most of us, we're at home. We are starting to see some attractions open up. So some of us would have the opportunity to be in our offices, but our real world observations are really going to drive how an attraction is able to reopen. And so taking that knowledge and then combining that knowledge with what we know as an industry. So when someone says to you, you have to keep 6 foot physical distance from person to person, we also know in an attraction that that's not always going to be possible. There's going to be changes that would have to be made to allow that to happen. And we also have been hearing about other attractions that are saying things like it's going to be 50%. Well, some of our attractions cannot operate at 50%. Some of them are going to need to discuss 15% or 25%. And then the third component is regulatory requirements. We are in an industry that is regulated across many channels. We have the food and beverage operation, and then we have health and safety, and we have all these different departments that are then going to communicate and say, this is what you need to do. So we could have a locale like Florida have a set of rules, and in California have a whole nother set of rules. And so also, Mark, you might have a set of rules in San Diego that's unique to San Diego. That's not California. So it's this combination of all these things put together that are really going to be what we ought to do. Like I echoed last week, we're going to have to be flexible because I think a lot of these things will change daily, even hourly. We've been having meetings with people that say 1 hour they hear something, and the next thing you know, something else happens. So I want to start there with Mark and Kevin before we even go on to anything else. What are you guys both feeling as operators about how are you combining the real world, the attraction knowledge, and these regulatory requirements as you're even having planning discussions? Would you guys like to share?
Sure, Randy. This is Kevin. We've been utilizing the term fluid almost for the last 6 weeks, just because, to your point, it's been hourly, minute by minute, we're getting updates, and we're really being driven by the regulatory requirements. The real world observations, 100%. We all know where we're at, and what we're trying to glean from our observations and our experience, and trying to anticipate what the regulatory requirements are as where we're going to be going in the future. And that's really what's kind of focusing a lot of our work with my team is we're focusing on trying to anticipate what those regulatory requirements are going to be. And to your point, it's different from coast to coast. It's different from county to county, city to city. We're in an interesting situation. We've got attractions all over the world, and we're trying to develop standardized sets of requirements. But we're realizing how difficult it is to have that set of standards. We're doing our best to do that, but we're just hopeful that we can make sure that we get open safely and quickly, because like everybody else out there, I'm sure everybody's anxious to get out of their home and get back to work. So that's just a glimpse as to how we're handling this.
Yeah, I'll kind of agree with all of that. I think you could take a look at how different states are handling the entire crisis. Anyway, you get some hints at how your state might come back and allow you to come back. Obviously, we're in California. We think it's going to be a slow, conservative approach to reopening the state. So we're kind of planning along that in kind of worst case narrowing the most restrictive sets of new regulatory requirements, and then hope that it's not quite as bad as that. So we're planning from that end. We're again, as everybody says, we wish we had more information. We wish we knew more, but we just know what we know. So we'll just keep planning until that changes. But it is a little frustrating to try to make solid plans on an unsteady feet, so to speak.
and you bring up something. I was having a great chat with a really good friend. His name's Terry Riddle, and he's a vice president of food and beverage at Silver Dollar City. And he says right now, you just got to kind of take these questions as they come in and then challenge them a little bit and say, why is it that we need to do that? And he said, this is the time you need to bring together all of those people, even those regulatory agencies, and get them at the forefront as well. So, Mark, are you, I mean, you have a variety of, I don't even know if you have to work with the Coast Guard on some things. The USS Midway is a ship, it's a vessel. So I'm curious, are you bringing any types of agencies together now to ask them what their expectations are?
No, I'll be honest, not at my level. I think that our CEO is talking with the local authorities, with the Port of San Diego, which is our main regulatory agency here along the way. We don't worry too much about the Coast Guard because we're not going anywhere, I hope. But we did break 2 mooring lines today for some reason. So, I think we're, reaching out to feel the temperature of the local community. We don't have, I think, a state presence. We're really rooting on the big Universal and Disney, I'm sure, up in Sacramento, working that angle. But even within San Diego and the municipalities from the city, different parts of our community are dealing with this situation differently. And so it's tricky. I don't know that we have as much insight as some of the big industry leaders.
Yeah, I would just say, I think my advice to everybody on the call is that use this time to start to reach out and have those conversations, because you might have a health and safety inspector that's food and beverage that is going to Costco and is making decisions based on his experiences at a restaurant or a drive-through, and you might need to show now what you're doing to communicate to them what the differences might be. And speaking of Costco, that's why I want to talk about real world observations. These are my pictures of going to Costco, right? So like my perspective of the world is that places are they're using whatever means necessary to have some ingenuity about how do they communicate distancing. And so I think that your guests are going to see these types of experiences and have these experiences, and they're going to be looking to us to say, hey, Costco did this across their hundreds and hundreds of stores. What are you going to do for me? One thing I do want to communicate is that when you do it right now, it's noticeable. It's very, very, very noticeable. And then when you do it wrong right now, it's disastrous. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But to lay some context as we start talking about some shops and stores, the team from Event Network is going to show us, even little things like this, they crack me up. Like, these are the clean pens and the dirty pens, right? We're going to start to see these cues from other agencies or other locations that are going to help us make these decisions about what experiences look like. So that's kind of how I think we need to approach the conversations, taking what we see and what we know in the real world and then start applying it to our attraction world. Of course, our attractions are real world, but it's what our guests are going to expect from us and what maybe agencies and regulatory bodies might expect from us as well.
That's a great way to look at it, Randy. Some of the things that we're going to kind of talk through in this discussion is, one is, how do I develop a plan, and what are some of the things I need to be thinking about as I'm planning? How do I take that plan and give it life, right? The men and the women that run our attractions are really what bring everything to life. And so how do I turn that plan into action through my employees? How do I make sure that's communicated externally? And as well training the guest on what may be different. So those will be some of the topics that we'll be drilling into. And I think, just at a high level, when we're thinking about planning, and this goes back to kind of what I showed earlier, is really the goal is how do we create an environment where guests and employees feel safe, right? And focusing on employee safety, guest safety, and governmental regulations that may also apply. Mark, I know a couple days ago when we were talking with you, you had really, shared some ideas on what you're doing from a planning standpoint and how you may not be making one plan. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, we're planning across a couple of different aspects of our operation. Obviously, health and safety is a big aspect of that. ticketing and revenue. So that's our admissions and our partnerships with revenue generation, by network being one of them, working closely with them. And then our altered guest experience, as it will probably end up having to be. And so we have, a number of task force, but each one of those task force, we are including our marketing team, so because they're the folks that end up going to put messaging out about whatever changes we have to share with our guests, and then also brainstorming about new and different ways to communicate that we haven't used before. So there's a lot of idea generation. There's a lot of, it's really almost, and I hate to use the word exciting because nobody really wants to be in this situation, but for our team, it's really invigorating, coming up with new ways to not just, put in place social distancing and hand sanitation and those things that obviously we're going to have to do, but looking at our guest experience changes and not just short term, but things that we can change that would be good for us for the long term, and to really just think beyond this temporary place and time, and use new muscles in our organization that we haven't had to use. We've had a lot of success over our first 15 years, and now we get to kind of regroup and say, what do we need to refocus on? And so a lot of the planning is about that, beyond just the simple things we'll have to put into place, as Randy pointed out, the Costco, the queuing, and all of that. How can we get better during this time? How can we take a look at our previous pain points we've had in our operation? We never had the time to stop and fix. Now is a great opportunity. Change is hard, but it's not so hard right now. People are open to change. Scott Lobaugh used to always say, talk to us about the twatty, because that's the way we've always done it. That's over. There is no way we've always done it. Everything is new now. So in a lot of ways, our team is very energized to do this planning and remain, as you say, flexible. Things are going to change as we open, and we're going to have to be able to adjust on the fly.
Mark, that's a really great item you bring up. So for folks that may not be so familiar with BTWATI, it's kind of an acronym for something that a lot of attractions get stuck in, is, because that's the way we have always done it. This totally rips that up and allows a fresh start and a reimagining of that experience, which, is maybe unfortunate that we're having to do it, but it is also an opportunity to do so. Kevin, are there any thoughts? What's your viewpoint on kind of this planning cycle and some of the tools that you've been using to think through it?
I'm going to have to let you know that Kevin just had to step away like many of us. I think he said the word was fluid and flexibility. So he just texted me and said, I got to jump away for a bit, so I'll come right back. So he will be back, so we can ask him that question shortly.
Great. Thank you. So one of the first kind of in-depth topics that obviously I think a lot of attractions are thinking about is how do I implement social distancing at my attraction, right? So this group of school kids at an attraction is what we normally see at our parks, but now we need a little bit more space, and we need some things like that. So really wanted to kind of start talking through some of that. So, obviously there's these are some examples that we've seen out in the from China and South Korea, where, hey, these parks that have already opened or that were able to remain open, and how they've kind of implemented some of this social distancing, mainly from a queue standpoint. In the top left there, I think that's more of a park entrance feel. But even in on the far right of the screen there at Everland, that's an attraction queue. So I think it's really important as we're thinking through how we're going to put that social distancing in place for queue lines and for kind of these general experiences. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you for a little bit to kind of get your thoughts on what y'all have been thinking about from to implement distancing in kind of the attraction experience.
Sure. You know, we're a ship, we're an aircraft carrier, and we have a lot of enclosed spaces. We really feel like we're going to have to overcome some of the negative ship press that has been out there with cruise ships and at Teddy Roosevelt, and let people know that we have actually a lot of really open air spaces that they can come and safely social distance in, and perhaps rather than it being as free-flowing as it's been, we'll have more of a pathway through our hangar bay and our flight deck, which is primarily what we think we're going to be able to open to start with, those two areas, and create a great experience in those two areas. And we are, you know, looking at you know, it's funny, you know, at some things you think you got it all figured out, and we have a simulator ride, and we're like, okay, we social distance people in the queue, and we'll put up a barrier at the point of sale station, we'll be good to go. But the final step in launching that simulator ride, the operator and the guest have to almost be face to face within a foot of each other. But then you're like, well, maybe that's just dead in the water. So as you work through these things, you realize that you will have some limitations to be able to keep that social distancing. And then, as I think, as Randy said, you know, you want it to look like you really put some effort into, you know, into the design of your signage and your markers for social distancing. You thought through it, and so we're working those angles as well. And queue up the check your six. I will say it better remain 6 feet, because otherwise we're going to have to start all over again. So if it goes to 10 or 3, I don't know what we're going to do. Our great exhibits director, Mike Ozaki, worked on this over the weekend. We love it. We're going to move forward thinking this. We may not use Tom Cruise. That may not be possible, but we'll come up with a different one. But, you know, we wanted to have a real professional look and feel, as I'm sure all of our attractions want to do. Really connect with who we are and what we're about. So this is one of our efforts, at least first draft, for social distancing messaging.
That's really, really powerful kind of way to implement those markers and to really tie it to the theme and to the story of your attraction. I think that's really sharp. One of the things I think that also, you know, Randy had kind of mentioned a little bit is, you know, I think that we're going to have to rethink the queue lines, and the traditional queue line most likely may have to just become, you know, used very minimally, right? It's just feeding the attraction with its next round of folks that are actually boarding. And so that'll cause us to kind of think, well, how do we implement that queue elsewhere? And I think kind of the concept of virtual queuing is really going to play a powerful role there. So when I worked for Universal Orlando Resort, one of the leaders there, Rich Costales, that had been at Universal Studios Hollywood, had shared a story once about kind of, you know, the experience at the entering Universal Studios Hollywood. You used to actually get your studio tram tour boarding time as you kind of entered the park. Because obviously at that park, the studio tram tour is a very iconic attraction. It really takes you into the making of the movies. And so I think that this is probably a time where we kind of go back to that history, right? You know, is it that as I'm entering the park or some other place that I've chosen, that I'm getting maybe my time to actually show up to be right just in time for experiencing that attraction, and reducing our need to have very congested queue lines in situations where we may not want to support that, or where we have attractions that are just going to be very popular, and there's no way that a socially distant queue is going to be able to support them. So I think those are some ideas that we need to explore and leverage. One of the other things is, as I think about Randy's real world experiences and my, you know, occasional biweekly visit to the supermarket, is normally an experience that I'm doing in isolation, right? It's just me. I'm not bringing family, friends, kids with me. And so there, when I'm socially distancing myself, I'm one person against another one person. Obviously, though, our attractions are something that groups are going to come to, a family. And so I think as we're thinking through those 6 feet, it's really 6 feet from my group to 6 feet to the next group, right? So we're not able to maybe have, in a supermarket where it's maybe closer just to a 6 foot line. Maybe ours are just slightly larger where we actually put the dots at, because we've got to account for that group is not all standing on that one bubble. So I think that's an important element of it as well.
Matthew, I'm gonna jump in there just to ask a few more questions, because we were talking to Mark Berlin, and I actually have a couple questions for Mark about distancing. And I do want to note we have lots of great questions coming in. One of them just says, maybe we as an industry ought to lobby to change the words from social distancing to physical distancing, because this is a social activity. We are going to attractions to have fun with our friends and our family, and we want to feel safe. So really what we're talking about is having, and I guess this goes back to what you said, Matthew, it's a group of people that is socially connected, that is physically distanced from another group of people. But the question that came in from Jim Shea is to Mark. Mark, how are you going to manage? What are your thoughts about the close quarters conditions of your ship as you can navigate people through that experience? Obviously there's challenges. What are you looking to employ as people go into the ship? And the reason I want to bring this up is that many of the queue line experiences that I have enjoyed the most feel that there's experiences in a tight area, right? So I'm being queued and I'm having this experience as I move through the queue. And so I think that the challenges might be very similar to what it might be like to navigate through a ship like the USS Midway.
Yeah, as I mentioned, initially, we anticipate a lot of those areas to not be reopened to our public just because of the difficulty of maintaining physical distancing, and also to give our cleaning crews an opportunity. We have a big ship. If we reopen it all with our reduced staffing, it's very difficult to sanitize all the public spaces. But we do realize that, the hangar deck and the flight deck is super cool. The flight deck is probably the sexiest part of the ship anyway, but people have a real interest in those spaces that they're not going to get to see. So we're thinking about more of the guided tours of those areas. Maybe people sign up for online, and our great volunteer docents can take a family, people that are know each other, and lead them through a space safely and in a timed fashion. We also have lots of, we've done a lot of things for ADA folks, people who can't get into some of those spaces already, and we have these kiosks that show and explain and talk about these hard to access places, and we're looking at moving those around for more people to experience, which is another interesting thing. It's an interactive that now we have to somehow make non-interactive, because we don't want people pushing buttons. But so that's kind of what we're looking at. We're gonna start with improving our hangar bay flight deck experience, adding to that, and then slowly, as we get our feet, start figuring out, because the one thing we don't want is have a queue lined up to get into a space that, so it's something we're still working through, but I think what we're thinking is that probably a pre-booked guided tour of those spaces with your own family or your own group is the way we'll end up going.
Mark,
sorry. I was going to say that's going to be interesting. As a follow-up, when we get to the cleanliness section, I think that there's another element there of cleaning as you go, so that the next guest, as they move into like an area, feels like, oh, this has been sanitized. So I just want to make sure that we'll cover that later as well. Matthew.
Yeah. So, Mark, the one thing I think that I lose sight of, maybe from a distance, if I were to look at your attraction, right, this huge ship, I notice the hugeness of it. But one of the things I think, are you leveraging kind of that openness of the flight deck at all? Like, how are you thinking of using that?
So yeah, so obviously in our messaging, when it's trying to entice people to come back and visit, we'll be highlighting our open air spaces. But what we plan to do is we have some great activities that we already do up there. We do great talks and presentations at our catapult area, at our landing trap area. We plan to expand those. I mean, our volunteers are our best asset. Our docents are amazing. They really deliver our guest experience. So we feel like with the space we have up there, we can have even more of those physically distanced interactions with our docents that people love anyway, and try and make those maybe something that we continue on past this time period.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, taking that one asset that normally you may not market, right? Like, hey, this flight deck is huge, and it's open air and it's stuff like that. It really becomes this now marketable item as we're looking for ways to communicate coming to my attraction as a safe and a good experience. That's a great point. Some of the other images, so many of us are probably familiar that Singapore kept most of its attractions open far later than everyone else. And one of the ways that they were able to do that was leveraging or implementing various procedures like temperature checking as folks came in. And this was, Randy, I think this was something that you had run across on Facebook on how they were communicating and some of the things that they were putting in place.
Yeah, it's just kind of re-echoing, but it's nice to see it in video form. So this link will be available to everybody, but it's a Facebook video, or just go to Resorts World, Sentosa, and you can Sentosa, sorry, and you can see it. But it's interesting to see even like how the cast or team members are getting involved. You know, they have been entrusted to create physical space and social distancing. So of course we have the queues, and there's theater seating examples. So it's a great video that actually Kevin Copany shared with me and said, hey, check this out. And there's some really interesting information there. I'll try to post the link into the Facebook link into the QA chat so you guys can see that a little bit more in detail. And then in addition to physical and social distancing at your attractions, I think it's really important to think about your other experiences at our attractions, our revenue centers. Obviously, it's a huge percentage of our operation, and many of us are thinking about a phased reopening, wherein maybe we cannot have all the table serve restaurants open in phase one or your stores. So there's some really low tech ideas that I wanted to present to you. To tell you about that Costco experience, I brought my items to Costco, and they had put a fold-up 6-foot table in front of me as a buffer between actually, you want to go back to that slide, you'll see it. They had just put these tables in front, and this prevented me as a guest from getting too close, right? So low tech. It's a low-tech solution. It allowed me to put my items down. Actually, I was making a return, but these tables were employed elsewhere. They also surrounded their beverage stations with the same tables, and then they put all of the sodas away. So you were not filling your own sodas. They were filling them for you. They presented it with gloved hands. They'd fill it and hand you the drink. They'd place it on the table. They'd back off, and you'd pick up the item. As soon as you left one of these stations, somebody sanitized it. And so you would see that happening in front of you. So we need to start thinking of all these techniques that we might employ. And then as we start talking about distancing at our gift shop, let's go back to that slide again. You can see that in some areas, you're going to need to reposition your payment terminal. A couple weeks ago, Grant Rosich from Palace Entertainment was chatting with us, and something, if you missed that call, talk to your point of sale provider and your credit card terminal provider today. Get this in motion. You can streamline your prompts. There's no need for you to actually have to press the green button here, which is important to eliminate if you can. In a perfect world, you might even tape this up. The only thing that you need to do is tap your credit card if it's a Wi-Fi or NFC-enabled credit card. Tap it on most of the terminals. Use your Apple Wallet or your Google Wallet, or insert the chip. But for the most part, no one has to touch anything. So what you want to do is you want to talk to them about eliminating the payment confirmation screen, ignore the signature, ignore the PIN. Those are 3 requests that you can make so that your transaction can be as simple as insert card, step back, enter the transaction, and pull the card when the authorization goes through. So Cheryl Larson is saying that she went to Walgreens yesterday. They just had a Q-tip dispenser that was sitting right next to the PIN pad. Yeah, visually have a sanitizing wipes or something close by, or do it for your guests. So we'll talk about cleanliness as well in regards to that, but present it in front of the guests so you can have it. Another option is going to be self-scanning. So I want to talk to Andrea about this at Event Network. Andrea, you and Larry, we were talking about stores. And although your stores are designed today to your employee would scan, we could imagine an environment where a guest gathers their items and they can scan their own items, and the customer is doing some work because they're touching the items. What kind of ideas have you guys been generating? Event Network, you operate many stores around our cultural space, so you're in a great, unique position to offer us some really helpful advice as a management team that runs these stores. So I'm interested to hear what you guys are talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark said it so eloquently earlier. There's no new norm, and there's a lot of exciting ideas that are coming up on new and different ways to do things. Obviously, our team members and guest safety is our number one concern, and also making them comfortable. 3 months ago, if you had said, nope, scan that yourself, that wouldn't necessarily be a good guest service mantra to have. So we're really exploring options as to how to streamline that and, of course, make our guests as comfortable as possible. Right now, we're currently having one of our team members dedicated to a register, along with implementing, certain queue measures, as well as really promoting that contactless payment. It's really amazing. I know Ella will tell you it's really widespread in Europe, but Hanover Research just did a study this past January that 84% of retailers can take contactless payment, but only 34% of customers are aware of it. So we plan on doing little things like adding signage, right at the register so that guests are aware, to try and make it as seamless and easy as possible while still providing that guest service. Larry, if you have anything to add?
So that's great, Andrea. I would only add that we are going to, like similar to where Mark is at, with the idea that there is really the coverage now to change quickly and to learn and to adapt and to circle back and to close that loop as quickly as we can. So the willingness to embrace all the things that Andrea is speaking to and Mark is speaking to, and to move and to share and through communities such as this, I think will prove to be extremely valuable as all this is happening so quickly.
Yeah, and I'm imagining myself in one of your stores. I've been to many of them, and I'm usually drawn to the plush mountain that's in the middle of the store, right? And it got us talking and thinking that the design of stores is actually going to need to change right now, wherein a store is often where it's a repository where we put our guests through, obviously, to entice them to make some purchases. The design of a store, I think we were talking about this last week, maybe. A lot of stores are designed in an attraction like an IKEA, like you navigate around and you see this, oh, I got to have this. I mean, I've got a Dobby right here. I've got a Pound Mickey. I've got all these things in my office that I just grabbed onto. I've got my wand right here. I mean, I have all these items, and the experiences to get some of these items is going to be very different in the future. And so what are you guys seeing in terms of just layouts of designs for a store? what changes would you recommend that the attractions make today as they reimagine their store footprint?
That's an excellent question, because I think there's a lot of easy things that people can do just to be more conscious of it. And again, 6 months ago, you wanted people to meander throughout the entire store. You wanted people to be engaging with the product, demoing it, picking it up, trying it, playing with it, smelling the lotion, where that's all, no-nos right now. It just would be one big germ fest. So how do we lessen those touch points while still providing that great guest service? And it goes along with training our teams, too. A big part of our training is we had a 10-4 rule. You saw a guest, within 10 feet, you smiled, you made eye contact. Within 4 feet, you engaged them verbally. Well, that's now going to be the new 10-6 rule. So there's different things that we're, doing to change that are just little that, is definitely important in training your teams, but also the layout of your store. I highly recommend taking just a floor plan overshot and look at the fixtures. Is that helping promote social distancing? Maybe you need to remove one. Maybe you can just adjust them so you're kind of dictating the traffic flow in a more natural way for guests that is more intuitive to keep that social distancing. Again, as easy as we make it for our guests, they're going to feel safer and just be more comfortable in general. So it'll provide them a better experience. And that would be the same with the registers as well. A lot of cash reps have their registers really close together. Consider moving one and take a look at that queue line. We have a floor plan up from the Lincoln Park Zoo that actually enables us to, if there was a queue line that formed, to go off, from each side of that. So you're not having that wrapped stanchion kind of line. So it's something I think could be easy tweaks that can help you promote that social distancing.
And you might need to just rethink your displays. I was on a great IAPA call yesterday with, we were talking about displaying your food products and displaying your merchandise. You just might need to display it differently so that plush mountain maybe exists somewhere else. I have 5 kids, and I was laughing in my head the whole time thinking, like, there could be a huge revenue upside when you said, you really can't touch the lotion. But, my kid would be trying to touch everything. It's almost like this, you touch it, you buy it mentality might be coming where, we might see just huge increases because it's something that you see and it's like, you sure you want it? Here it is, and you might see some opportunities there where people might want to have that connection back to the product, and people might be yearning to spend some money so they have that connection to that special time. Even though it's craziness when we're thinking about it, it might be a connection point. I do want to ask, I have a few questions from the audience. One of them was about the credit cards, and it had to do with, is there a floor or ceiling? Now, and Ella, I'm going to jump over to you. In the UK, I believe recently they upped from 30 to 45 pounds the requirement for credit cards. Are you seeing any other restrictions being lifted to allow for more contactless? I understand your contactless is the norm, but the requirements to not touch anything and have a quicker purchase?
I'm not sure if there's been any official thing because of the virus, but we certainly have upped the limit recently on contactless payments. And then I think with Apple Pay, although I don't often spend it that much, but I think it can go up to like 150 or even no limit on Apple Pay as well. So it makes it even easier to make purchases and not even worry about taking your purse. I don't even take my purse out of the house. I just take my phone with me all the time. So it just means you can hover over the thing and not have to touch anything. It makes it so much safer. So we're really used to it. The fact, whenever I go to America and they take away my card, I get very twitchy. So yeah, it's been the norm here for ages, but I don't think there's been any increase in particular response to the virus, but people can correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, I don't have the exact number in the US, but I know that usually you can set that limit with your merchant provider to some extent. And all so right. I would imagine Larry from Event Network is saying, yes, he's definitely agreeing with that. So these are the types of things you want to do now, right, Larry? You want to be reaching out, changing your merchant rules so that you can have as much contactless payments as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be very proactive, and there's more flexibility than ever to be accommodating. So certainly something you want to be out front of.
And I think this is another area where we can look back on because that's the way we've always done it. I think a lot of attractions that have implemented EMV maybe have not yet taken advantage of the fact that I probably don't have to require a signature anymore, right? My responsibility for the credit card charge is if I use an EMV device and they dip the chip or they do contactless, that then I'm absolved, and so that and the credit card company doesn't really care about a signature anymore. So are we making people go through that step when they don't really need to? I'll give you a personal story recently where I ordered some food over the phone, and I provided my credit card number so that really all I was doing was picking up. And you could have seen my face cringe when she brought out a checkbook and she wanted me to sign. And it was, why are you forcing me to go through this step of contact when I don't want this right now? And one of the things I think that maybe is that we had to revisit in that situation was she needed to know if I wanted to tip, right? That's probably something that's very important. And that's another opportunity where we can reimagine that experience, and there's going to be this openness to what Andrea was saying earlier about me self-scanning my merchandise. I'm going to be very happy to, over the phone, say, yeah, you know what, I want to go ahead and put a tip on that. Let's go ahead and do this amount. And then that way I don't have to go through any of these cringe-worthy experiences later. So I think that's really great. Andrea, the one other thing I wanted to ask you is, so one of the things that we're seeing in some of the parks that are opening is indoor spaces are kind of off limits because there's kind of this, not as much airflow and a little bit more congested in the initial openings. So from a merchandise standpoint, what are you thinking about there?
We're doing spill out or selling outside wherever we can. A lot of our locations, certainly the open air ones like zoos, do have multiple areas throughout the park that we can utilize first. Because all research indicates, as everyone knows, people are going to feel more comfortable in open air environments. Even at USS Midway with Mark, we have a kiosk up on the flight deck. And that sounds like, where a lot of people are going to congregate and really spend their time. So we'll certainly take advantage of that. And as much as people can do that, if you have mobile POS, if you have the ability to bring fixtures out into a lobby area that may have more open air space, I think from a comfort level, it'll make us feel safer.
That's great.
You could also, I think what we can also start to see is that some of these mobile carts that were maybe selling some food that maybe you're not able to sell right now, depending on any kind of regulations. I don't want to name any types of foods, but you might have popcorn and you're not able to do popcorn right now. You could turn those carts into sales carts. You could put your star retail products there. And then you might go through your gift shop and get rid of anything, all the dogs in the gift shop, anything that's not selling for you. This is a time to reduce some of that inventory, to clear it out. Somebody was selling online a lot of souvenirs now. I think it's also, Silver Dollar City. If you go to their website, you can buy the special kit of all these souvenirs in one kit that gets sent to you. So I think we can strategize right now and be creative in our offerings about what we're going to sell. And I want to say hello to Kevin. And Kevin, we totally appreciate the flexibility to have you coming back. But while you were gone, I think Matthew was asking you a question, and we were talking about social distancing, or the new word we want to use, physical distancing, with family groups. And the conversation came up about tram experiences and something similar that you have obviously at Hollywood. But in the old days, you used to get a tram time when you arrived. I mean, are you thinking you're going to go to that extreme? Are you thinking you're going to remove queues completely? What kind of ideas might be kicked around in conversations that you guys are having?
Well, I don't think anything's off the table at this point. Like I said, anything that's going to allow us to safely get back online and start providing experiences for our guests is on the table. I would be surprised if, as a group, we went completely away from queues, and especially even with the trams. it greatly changes the capacity of any park when you go completely queueless. So, but at the same time, look, I mean, it's all about getting back to providing guest experience. So I really don't think at this point, until we know what the regulations are going to look like for us in California, I think we're going to look at every opportunity to plan for whatever will get us back open. So, we're exploring all of it, and there's really nothing that's off the table at this point. So, I wish I had more definitive answers about what we are going to do, but what my team is doing is we're producing a number of scenarios that will help us get open, knowing full well many of them are going to be worthless or just tossed away. But the hope is that there are elements from each one of these plans that we're able to utilize once we know what the rules of the game are going to be.
And Kevin, I would think that also the experience, like you're going to probably have different solutions for different attractions, right? Because you're going to have to not only deal with this attraction's load time, this attraction's capacity, what your physical queuing is, but you're probably also coming up with kind of a Swiss Army knife of, okay, this is a tool I can use here and not here.
Yeah, correct. Like I said, nothing's off the table. we're really looking at everything, and we're not looking at a one-size-fits-all plan. We're really looking at what can we best do to provide the best possible experience for whoever we can provide it for. And unfortunately, I hate the vagueness of what I'm saying, but it's really what we're living in right now. And I appreciate you guys being so flexible. If I had a meeting that came in, and it kind of gets back to my initial topic of fluidity. We've been using that term in our group meetings for 8 weeks, 6 to 8 weeks, and it's the reality of where we're living. And I had an emergency meeting I had to jump in, so I appreciate you guys being flexible, and I apologize I had to jump off for a little bit.
Hey, Kevin, you brought something out that Mark actually brought up in a previous chat I had with him, and Mark, you had said that even with all these challenges of this time, that you internally are really pretty excited, and you and your team at the Midway are really excited because you're getting, the words you used, where you're getting to work and flex some muscles that you really haven't worked in a while. And then the quote I want to make sure I attribute to you is that you said, when we come back, we're going to come back better than ever. We're going to come back smarter and better. And these items that we've been discussing today that might be temporary might become the new operational best practices of the future. And Mark, I just thought, I'm sorry to steal the words, but you guys really have a hopeful outlook around all this.
So thank you for remembering what I said, because I wanted to. So I appreciate that, Randy. But no, I think it is true. I mean, we've got a great team here anyway, but they are very excited to rise to the challenge of the moment. And again, being able to take the opportunity to affect change that is always hard to do. And what my hope is that as an institution, organization, that becomes part of our institutional memory, that we were able to enact a lot of change very quickly, and everything was okay, and it came out well, and we had some long-term successes, so that down the road, when we're faced with other bumps in the road or difficult times, we can remember that no, we can change, we can do this. So it's all the way around. I totally believe I can come out of this more resilient, better organization than as we ran.
Great. So I wanted to kind of move our discussion into a little bit of the cleanliness that we may have to be dealing with as we're reopening our attractions. Specifically, I think one of the big things that we're seeing at all the parks that are reopening, and I think is probably going to come out as a recommendation, at least here in the United States as well, is that kind of this idea of using face masks as we're coming, both from an employee standpoint of an attraction as well as a guest going. One of the things I thought was really exciting, we've had Jared from the Cincinnati Zoo that's been part of our webinars in the past, and they recently launched, branded face masks, specifically on their store selling to consumers. But it's also a great, way, if we're going to have to do something like this, how can we theme that in? Andrea, I didn't know if you had any thoughts on kind of face masks and even, what y'all have been doing from a merchandise standpoint on that.
Certainly. Well, we've been working with a vendor called Castafal to develop a program for our partners that they can easily access and get logoed, branded if they'd like, masks for their team. And they're a fabulous company, wonderful to work with. So if anybody does need a source for face masks, I recommend reaching out to them because they do have stock in some varieties right now. And we'll have, it's interesting, we have different varying positions within our partners on having them available in the gift shop, if that's something they'd want to carry or not. But we do have lines prepared for those that would like those when we reopen.
Great. One of the other things I think I noticed, was when I was looking at some of the parks that were open is kind of what they were committing to on their guests. And one of the parks mentioned kind of one use, one clean, right? So I think that's, what we're seeing here, like with Shanghai Happy Valley in the bottom left-hand corner, right, is ride restraints being, sanitized after every use. And I think there's probably maybe a balance between that as well as making available hand sanitizing and things like that. So, Kevin, I don't know if kind of what your thoughts were on that, but wanted to toss it over to you to see if there's anything you wanted to share on kind of maybe that cleaning process of the attractions.
I wish I knew. It's something that's being discussed, and we're really waiting on guidelines for what the anticipated requirements are going to be. Is it going to be, because it presents a pretty enormous challenge when you start looking about cleaning each vehicle in between each cycle. I mean, do you clean it, run empty one cycle, and then reload the vehicle, and then that gives you time to make sure that you're able to properly sanitize the vehicle. But and the products that will be available, and will it be safe for our team members to utilize those products? So there's so many questions around it. And again, we're exploring it all, but not really sure what that's going to look like. We know there's going to have to be some level of sanitation or sanitization prior to allowing guests back on cycle by cycle. But yeah, I wish I had a better answer. I think everybody wishes they had a better answer for that.
Very true.
What we might do is, because we obviously have a lot of questions about that. I mean, I can see that Jim Say from Premier Rides is on. I'm going to try to get a link, or if some of the manufacturers are able to give us some information, or maybe we'll just have another webinar where we'll take a deeper dive into what the mechanics of that experience might need to look like. In phase one, you might be doing some safe cleaning to your ride and attraction. As we move forward, I think over time we'll better understand what needs to happen. Obviously, lots of these rides are very durable, and they have surfaces that maybe don't need that level of cleanliness, but you obviously have to use the right types of cleaning materials. And then, like you said, Kevin, we might have to look and see to what extent we can operate all the rides. Mark Berlin, you had mentioned a little bit that you might even see that you're not going to open the whole ship anyway initially, and then you might rotate the ship's opening so certain sections are open. So you could do maintenance and cleaning. And that's probably going to be the normal during a phased reopen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, you want to give your team the opportunity to do a good job and really sanitize the spaces that you're utilizing. We're actually having a demonstration tomorrow up in the flight deck on a drone cleaning system where you see that on the screen here, the guy with the backpack and the spray. Picture that type of thing being delivered via drone across the flight deck, and I don't know. But we'll look at, like Kevin, we'll look at anything. We'll think about anything. And drones are fun, so maybe that'll be awesome. And maybe that'll just be a nice message we can put out to people. Look at the technology used. Our IT director, Joe Gursky, I think he's on the call. He's looking into the UVC lighting. I think he's trying to build a robot out of the UVC lighting, which that also sounds really fun. And in some other ways, you can think about some of these safe and healthy health aspects that sound really burdensome, and say, how can we make that fun? How can we incorporate cleaning into the entertainment side of what we do? How can we integrate taking temperatures? How can that be a entertaining experience, or any of the things we're going to have to do? Remember who we are and what we provide to our guests. So that's what we're looking at. Again, like Kevin, anything? We're not quite sure yet.
And we had a lot of requests for the name of the mask company. So Andrea, can you say that one more time? And I believe we might be sending it in the Q&A as well.
It's Castlefel. It's KASTLS. It's in Frank EL.
Great, thanks a lot. And then obviously, they could probably just reach out to you, and you can discuss some options there. And I think it is going to be a fun way. Mark, that's a great example. How does cleaning become fun? How do masks become fun? As we mentioned previously, incorporate the visuals of mask wearing guests and your staff as soon as possible. Whether you do it digitally or you take photos now. Cheryl Bailey mentioned from the USS Midway in our chat that they published some previous stock photos on social media, and almost quickly were reminded that people were not wearing masks. So something to consider. Your customers are expecting that level of standards now, that your team members are wearing masks. So that's something you have to do. I had a very similar experience that Matthew had. I picked up pizza. The person wasn't wearing masks. I watched them touching it, and honestly, I made my decision. That pizza restaurant is now crossed off. I'm just not going to go there. So in your visuals and in your marketing materials, embrace that now, because it's going to be necessary to build comfort to your customers. We had a question and a comment come through about souvenir cups. We all love souvenir cups. We know that they are a huge hit. Bernie Campbell was chatting in the Q&A. He's from Worley Drinkworks. What is a souvenir cup going to look like in the future at an attraction? Well, obviously, we're going to still sell them, but you might need to start preparing for how you deliver the souvenir cup. You might need to maybe have it wrapped up in plastic already. You might need to unbag it. You might need to hand it to them previously wrapped. When the guest goes to fill that, you might fill it for them. You might do what Costco's doing. And then when they come for their refills, we're most likely not going to be using those Coca-Cola Freestyle machines initially. We most likely will not be allowing guests to pour their own drinks. So that's an area where you probably want to reclaim those self-service drink stations for other items that you can put there. And then what Bernie had suggested, it looks like most of the discussions are around using paper cups, so that when someone comes with a souvenir cup, that they'll be maybe handing them a paper cup for their refill, so that they can pour it in, or they can just have it. Those are the types of conversations you're going to start needing to kick around for how you're going to manage souvenir refills.
That's great. And Randy, I think part of that moves into one of the key parts of delivering whatever plan we come up with, and that's our employees. I would anticipate that the experience that Randy had at the pizza restaurant he went to was probably not what that pizza restaurant was expecting to happen. But what I believe probably happened is that, either the messaging didn't get to that employee, there wasn't a clear understanding that, for that employee of kind of their role in this ultimate, focus on safety. So I think that's one of the things that's got to be key to when we're planning and what we're thinking. One of those things that we can leverage is virtual trainings before folks even get on site, right? If we know that, hey, we're going to start prepping for reopening, or we know that we need to start getting this sort of education there, how can we start delivering that virtually so that we can start to kind of plant those seeds? How can we then take, some of these plans and make sure that everybody understands their role in it? And me at my attraction, I understand how my attraction might be different than the attraction my friend works at and what's important there. Because I think that's ultimately when a guest is visiting our attractions and they're seeing things going on, they're seeing what each one of our employees are doing, and that's the only thing that matters to them. It doesn't matter that we've spent the last X weeks and months in meetings planning and coming up with ideas. It's exactly what that experience is. And so I think we probably all realize that in our normal guest services training and things like that. But I think that there's going to need to be an increased focus on that as we roll out this new and this potentially changing information. We've got to have effective ways to get that out. And that's kind of why next week's webinar is really kind of devoted, partially to that, because it is so critical. Every employee understanding what role they play, and how their actions translate into what's going to happen to that attraction, that venue, that brand, I think is important so that we have a clear understanding. Making sure that we are reinforcing some of these either changes or new elements or even what we already trained last week on in every one of our shift changes and throughout that. I think over communicating is really going to be what leads to success here. Mark, I'm not sure kind of what the Midway has been thinking about training, or if there's anything that specific you'd like to share related to that.
Well, I would just say that in additional to our frontline employees, our partners, frontline employees, we have a large volunteer population that delivers our guest experience, our docents, our safety personnel. And I think more importantly, it's communicating with those folks about our new procedures and getting buy-in from them. I mean, a lot of these volunteers flew jet aircraft, maybe spent some time in the Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam, and they may not feel so great about having to wear a mask when they get the presentation. And a lot of people really have a lot of personal opinions on a lot of that. And it's trying to acknowledge that they might have those opinions, but communicate to them why we're doing this for their safety, for our guest safety, and working it into their new protocols and training. Our volunteers are great. I think they'll pick right up on it, but it will probably take a little extra effort on our part.
And Mark, I think that's one of the strengths of some places that have more shops. And I don't mean to keep talking about Costco, but I've seen it at Chick-fil-A and at other restaurants and In-N-Out Burger. I know we talked about them, but the more stores that you have, or the more shops you can have this consistent training. And Kevin was echoing that a little bit as well. Andrea, I want to ask you about training a variety of stores. How are you taking that task where you have all these employees that many of them aren't working with you right now because of the situation with the stores closed? What does your training process look like, and how do you plan on communicating this new normal of training to your stores?
Absolutely. As Mark said, we work with a variety of different partners that are in different regions, different sizes, certainly. So we have our own internal training that we do for each of our team members, but we also ask that all our team members go through our partners training as well. Particularly now more than ever, there's new protocols, new policies, new procedures going into place that we want to make sure that we're over communicating both to our team members and our partners so that everybody understands the expectations and what the new normal is. I had kind of alluded to earlier, part of our guest service training was, we had a 10-4 rule that has now become the 10-6 rule in terms of guest engagement. So we've set aside some time so that when we bring people back, we will have some dedicated days for training so that they understand what are the new expectations and what are the new policies. In terms of cleaning and maintenance, we're certainly instituting a new schedule for that kind of stuff. So just so that they understand too that their safety is, primary concern as well. So what are we doing in terms of PPE and things like that for them, so that they know that they're cared for, so that they can obviously then help take care of our guests when we're ready to open.
Yeah, and I'm doing a quick time check, and we said 75 minutes, so we've gone a little over. But I just want to, something you said is really impactful, that you were talking about over communicating, and that really echoes our next slide about transparency. And we're going to show you, this is something that blew me away. The win was being completely transparent. They posted this online. They're sharing the plans. They're telling everybody what they're going to do. And Ella, you've started to see these types of reports all over the place. Is this going to be what attractions are probably expected to do? And do you think this is just going to be how we run business in the future?
Yeah, I think there'll be absolutely paramount to be so transparent with your guests, and it will encourage them to come back. I mean, if you don't know what it's going to be like before you enter, it will be hard to promote yourselves properly. And I think there'll be a big marketing push, like you say, having pictures of people with masks on, but also promoting these documents to help guests feel they're safe. Yep, there she is. There's one with a mask on. But yeah, I think it will be so important to share knowledge with your industry colleagues as well as the public, so that we can all get back on track together.
And I just want to say what a great resource Blue Loop has been in bringing all this information together. It's probably the first feed I'm looking at. You guys are doing a great job. And we're all in this together. Resources like Blue Loop and Gateway and Ticketing and IAPA, we're all here to try to kind of bring everything together to have these conversations. As we wind down, I definitely want to thank everybody for an amazing job. Larry and Andrea, Ella, Mark, Kevin, Bill, thank you guys so much for sharing your thoughts. We have a lot of questions that we are going to get to, so expect some follow-ups from everybody. I want to let you know we're going to have that conversation next week, so you're all invited to join us as we talk more about guest experience and guest training. I think there might be a link for the next webinar right here. So if you can join us next week, we'd love to have you. If you have ideas that you'd want to share, in fact, last week we had a poll. We took all that information, and a lot of what you mentioned in the poll we're incorporating into this next week's session. We'll be joined with the team from Attraction Pros. We're getting together and some other operators to talk about that guest experience. I want to let you know personally, myself and Matthew and other members of our team, if you want to have a deeper dive in any conversation, if you just want to book a little bit of time to go into some of this in more detail for your attraction, we're available, as are many of our colleagues at Gateway Ticketing. Of course, reach out to your peers in the community. Ask them for help. People like Kevin and Mark are just an email away. Ask them for help and ask what ideas that they shared today you might be able to incorporate, because that's what our attraction community is all about. Judging by the sound of my voice, it's probably time to sign off. But stay safe, everyone. Thank you guys so much for a great webinar, and we'll see you guys all next week.
See you next week. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Matt.